Welcome. What is up? This is the Innate Effect Podcast with Dr. Alex DeFrancisco, where we talk about everything from health to wellness to business and mindset in the everyday life of a pediatric chiropractor. So without further ado, let's get into it. What is going on, y'all? So the title of today's episode is A Chiropractor for My Kids? Yes, that is right. Again, my name is Dr. Alex DeFrancisco, and I'm a pediatric chiropractor here in beautiful Grapevine, Texas. And, inevitably, I always get that question from somebody like, really, why would my kid need a chiropractor? And then there's usually somebody who has a pretty good joke. How many little kids are coming to see you with sciatica, with thrown out backs? I can't, my kid's fine. He doesn't have anything wrong with him. I don't think you could adjust his attitude, right? Could you be able to do that? Maybe I would bring him if you could adjust his attitude. And, I laugh at all of those the same. You learn pretty quickly as a chiropractor that you're going to need a pretty good sense of humor, or it could be a pretty long day at the office for you. So the way that I just really like to see it is that that's somebody's attempt to bring me joy through humor. And I like to think that the universe is abundant, that people are here for a reason, that they're trying to always make your life better, that the world and the universe is conspiring in your favor as long as you see it that way, right? So that's how I always take all of those jokes, and I take them all with a smile. But yes, we absolutely do see plenty of kids in our office. How old? Boy, they could be just even a week old, all the way up to 18. I mean, we see everybody in between. Obviously, we see adults, but like I said, this is a podcast this episode is for why your kid specifically would want to see a pediatric chiropractor. So you see, chiropractors in general, we're more concerned with the structure that's actually within your spinal column as opposed to the bones themselves or the vertebra themselves. So what we're really interested in is the spinal cord. And the reason we're interested in the spinal cord is because that is the highway that runs the length of your body, that connects every aspect of your body. Because where that spinal cord is eventually going to end up is at your brain. And if you go back down the other way, so if we start at our brain, we go down the spinal column, we go down the spinal cord, and out at different segments of each vertebra, there are different nerves that go out to different muscles, glands, organ systems, you name it. Every single aspect of your body is controlled by your brain. There's not a single function that goes on that doesn't start in your brain, that doesn't go to the spinal cord, that doesn't go out to a nerve, that isn't controlled by that master system that we call the nervous system, right? And so that's what those three things make up, right? You've got your brain, your spinal cord, and your nerves. All three of those things make up your nervous system. And that's really what we're working with as chiropractors. As we're trying to affect your neurology. We're not so much trying to move a bone. That just happens to be the medium in which we affect the nervous system, because that is the closest thing to the spinal cord, which is the closest route we can get back up to the brain. So that is a long-winded way of saying, how can those things still help my child? They don't seem to be in any pain. They struggle with all these different chronic illnesses, but I can't imagine that's something that you can help with, right? Wrong. That's what I was talking about. That's what we're getting into with the nervous system here. So let's break it down a little bit further. If there's really one word that describes how a pediatric chiropractor is going to be able to help your child, or why they'd be able to help your child, if I could sum it up in just one word, I would say stress. That is how we're able to help everybody with just about anything. We're not looking to cure any illnesses directly. We're looking to regulate a person's nervous system so that it is able to perform all the functions necessary to allow for your body to heal itself from above down, inside out. So starting from the brain, going down from the spinal cord out to the nerves, out to everything else. That's what I mean by above down, inside out. That's what we're working with as chiropractors. So the easiest way that I'm always able to break this down is, let's talk a little bit about stress. What is it? How does that affect us on a daily basis? So as human beings, we love to compartmentalize things, right? We like to have things squared away. We like to put them in boxes. It makes it easier for us to have a better understanding of things, right? So we like to think of things as physical stress and mental stress and emotional stress, and for some people, even spiritual stress, right? And all of those things are in their own little boxes, and they work independently from each other, at least in the majority of the population's mind, right? But in reality, that's just your body's way. Your body only knows it as one thing. Each of those things is just stress, right? And there's a certain threshold that every human being is able to adapt to on a daily basis. And that's what you do on a daily basis, is your nervous system is adapting to daily stressors, also known as your environment. So when you wake up in the morning, how are your kids? Like let's talk about you specifically. When you wake up in the morning, what's your day like? How did you start it? Did you start with a really loud alarm clock? Maybe you slept in and you went boom right into fight or flight mode, right? So that's a stressor that your body has to adapt and react to. You start to get ready, you get to the office, and maybe you're late to the office, or maybe a coworker is slacking on a project that you guys are needing to get done, and maybe your boss is breathing down your neck, and the bills are getting a little bit higher, and maybe you have to now all of a sudden you have to start taking your kid to a different school, and all of these things start to add up. Now they all start to look like different things, right? Some of them were physical, right? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep last night. Some of those things could be mental or emotional. Maybe that coworker in the cubicle next to you, he just pushes your buttons, man. There's he seems like a nice guy. He doesn't really do anything, but he's just stressful because he's got the worst jokes, right? And so that could be emotional stress. All of these things are daily stressors, right? That your nervous system is adapting to and reacting to on a daily basis. So much like anything else, we've got that tipping point, right? I think we all know about that one Wednesday when everything just seems to be bearing down. I used to call them college days, when I was back in undergrad, where it just seemed like everything went wrong. Anything and everything that could go wrong, Murphy's Law to the umpth degree. It's all going to hell. And you're just really having a hard time of it, and somebody just asks you a really simple question, and before you know it, you snap on them, right? And they kind of look at you like, I just wanted to know what time it was, right? And you sit back and you realize, like, hey man, I'm sorry, I'm just really stressed. I've had a really hard day, and and I didn't mean to take it out on you, right? Maybe you get home and maybe the kids are screaming and yelling. Maybe your wife or your husband or your significant other has like just a laundry list, right? A huge list of things for you still to do, even though you just had the longest day at work. Everybody knows what that tipping point is, right? And so that's what we talk about as chiropractors. Your body is only able to handle so much stress. And when we go over that threshold, something then occurs. Your body has now a choice to make. So much like let's think about a house, right? And there's an electrical storm going on, right? And lightning strikes, and there's an elevated amount of electricity in the house, right? To the point where it's starting to hit a threshold where now the house has to make a decision, right? Much like your body has to make a decision. There's too much energy, there's too much electricity in the house, so it now has a choice to make. Does it let it run wild and potentially let the house burn down, right? And because of a short circuit, or does it just blow a breaker, cut off all power to one particular area of the house, if not the entire area of the house, to save the house as a whole, right? So obviously that's what ends up happening. You have to find wherever that circuit breaker is. You go and you flip the breaker, and then, energy is obviously restored, power is restored. And now that area of the house is functioning the way that it is meant to function, right? Because if there's no power going to your kitchen, The refrigerator's turned off and it's not going to turn back on until it gets power sent back to it. Same thing. You got your air fryer or your microwave, depending on what kind of oven you have. If it's not getting the power that it needs, it can't do the job that it was designed for, right? So now all of a sudden, like I said, it's not able to do that job. Right. So you have to go in, you have to find the particular breaker that blew. Usually it's not the entire thing. Usually it's just a couple. You flip them on, power's restored, everything is back to normal. Right. So the same thing happens within our body is when we go over that certain amount, that particular stress threshold that your body's able to handle. Your body now has a choice to make. Does it let that energy just ping pong into your internal systems and just tear up your organs and potentially do some real damage to you, or does it blow a breaker? So now what does that look like, right? And that's what we as chiropractors call a subluxation. Okay. And so what that subluxation essentially amounts to is a blown breaker. So now what ends up happening is this can look like incorrect movement, not enough movement at a particular segment, that is now putting pressure on a particular set of nerves that go to different organs, organ systems, glands, muscles. And now whatever those nerves control, and they control everything, now all of a sudden those things are not working as well as they should be, right? So what our job is as chiropractors is we're looking for those blown fuses, we're looking for those blown breakers, and we're looking to turn them back on through the chiropractic adjustment. And so what that then allows to happen is now the brain is able to communicate with that area of the body, and the body is able to now communicate back correctly up to the brain. And now your brain is able to make the necessary adjustments, right? Now, if this goes on for days, weeks, months, years at a time, if it's never corrected, right, that's where we start to see some of this chronic disease and illness and different things that are so prevalent in our society today. So let's just think about it as, we like to call it like a safety pin cycle loop, right? So let's start at the very top. Let's start with our brain. Your brain controls everything, and it sends out different messages down that sensory highway known as the spinal cord, sends those messages down to the spinal cord, and when it reaches the segment or the level that it needs to, where those nerves go out to wherever it needs to communicate to, whether it's your heart, your lungs, your pancreas, your back muscles, your arm muscles, you name it, it sends that message out through those nerves to wherever it's going. Those organs, muscles, glands receive that message, send their own message back the other way to those nerves, to the spinal cord, up to the brain. The brain then receives that communication and again sends out the resources, and it just goes over and over and over again. And as long as that loop remains connected, as long as there's no interference to that communication, that's what we call perfect health. That's normal. That's what should be happening, right? But as we know, this might be the most stressful time in history. I might be a little bit biased because I don't really know what it was like even at this point, 30 years ago. I don't know what it was like 100 years ago. I don't know what it was like tens of thousands of years ago. But I think it's pretty safe to say that this is one of the most, if not the most stressful times in history, right? And it's affecting everybody. So let's take your child, for example. Let's take you, for example. If and when they hit that threshold and that breaker blows in a particular area, so now somebody is subluxated somewhere in their spine. Now let's look at this loop one more time. So we start at the brain, and that message goes down to the spinal cord, out to the nerves, to wherever it needs to go. But before it gets out to the nerves, that subluxation, that blown breaker, is going to interfere with the message. It's going to send a different message, a different amount of resources down that nerve to whatever muscle, gland, or organ it controls. That muscle, organ, or gland is going to get the wrong amount of resources. So then it's going to say, no, that wasn't right, and send a message back to that nerve, to the spinal cord. But again, that's where that blown breaker is, that's where that subluxation is, and it's going to distort that message. So the message that those organs, muscles, and glands are saying, hey, we need X, Y, and Z, in reality, maybe it's just X, Y, and B, right? Just a different message gets sent back up to the brain through the spinal cord, and the brain can only go off of the information that it has, right? So again, it's going to send the wrong amount of resources. And again, those muscles, organs, and glands are going to say, no, that's the wrong amount. Send a different message. It'll get distorted. And this goes on and on and on and on, right? That's where we start to see ADD, ADHD. That's where we start to see asthma. That's where we start to see Tourette's and tic disorders. That's where we start to see low back pain. That's where we start to see digestive issues, right? Because if this goes on for years at a time, these are some of the struggles that end up happening because those muscles, organs, and glands are not getting the resources that are needed, right? So our thought as pediatric chiropractors is let's stop this before it ever really gets going, right? So, I'm not here to say that there's anything wrong with your kids at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is what may appear to be fine now is actually just like spending a credit card, right? Your body is adaptive, it's resilient, it's going to do the best with what it's got. But after a while, that's why there's all of those jokes on Instagram or you get on social media, and it's like, man, the second I turned 30, all of a sudden it all went downhill. It's not that all of a sudden it went downhill, just in a blink of a moment that you turned 30, 40, 50. That's not when it happened. It most likely started when you were a kid. And it just persisted, and it just was compound interest. That's what you hear a lot of other people talking about, again, on social media and business, is this concept of compound interest with time, with money, with working out. The longer you do something, the more substantial it's going to end up being, right? So that's why some of these kids are having these issues as early as they are, because it's never been a more stressful time for pregnancy, for mothers, right? Even when they're in utero, before they even come into this world, mom is under a tremendous amount of stress. And that stress is getting hardwired into baby through that umbilical cord. That's why that connection between mom and child is just so special. And I tell patients in our office this all the time. For 9 months, give or take, that child was really the only one who really knew you, who really, really knew what you were going through, right? You might be close with your mom, or you might be close with, your significant other, or you might have the best friend in the world. But for those 9 months, you and that child truly understood each other because you shared those experiences on an unbelievably intimate level. So your child was under just as much stress as you were during that pregnancy. So right from the jump, they're coming in with a threshold that's already blown out. And so that's why we're able to work with kids, and that's why we're able to allow for them to be more resilient. That's what the chiropractic adjustment is really designed to do. It's allowing that brain to body and body to brain communication to happen, to allow your body to function at its highest potential, to be the most efficient that you can be under the most amount of stress possible and still handle that efficiently, right? We always talk about this in our office. We always say it's essentially raising the ceiling for your stress threshold. It's going to have to take an absurd amount of stress now for our subluxation to occur for you now. Does that make sense? Because we're essentially making your body more efficient. So it's going to take a greater amount of stress that doesn't happen as often, right? And we all have those days that I had been talking about a little bit earlier, right? We all have those days, right? When life just beats you down, and, and that's fine, right? That's, you could argue that's the human experience. You could argue that that's what we're here for, that if you don't experience the bad, you'll never truly understand what the good is. blah, blah, blah. I, in some ways, see that as job security, right? But on a day-to-day, we're going to make you more efficient at handling that stress. And that's what we're going to do for your child also, is we're going to allow them to be more efficient at handling that stress so that they don't have that blowout when things don't go their way, so that loud noise doesn't seem to be so disruptive for them, that these lights don't seem near as bright because they're not on 10 always, right? They're able to regulate those emotions. They're able to logically think through this and not be so overwhelmed all the time, because that's what some of those outbursts truly are. I don't believe that there are bad kids, and I don't believe that there are bad parents, obviously within reason, as long as you're putting in the effort. There are no bad kids and there are no bad parents. There are just those that need a little bit of help being a little bit more efficient at handling stress. And so that's ultimately what we do here in our office at Innately Chiropractic in Grapevine, Texas, but also across the world. I'm not the only person doing this. I obviously had to learn from somebody. There are so many phenomenal pediatric and family wellness chiropractic practices cropping up all over the country. So if you need pointed in the right direction, go ahead and give this a like and shoot me a DM, and I would be more than happy to help point you in the right direction for a practice like that. Or if you're in the DFW area and it sounds like I'm speaking to you, that I'm speaking to you, to your experience with your child, or even just your experience with yourself in life, go ahead, shoot us a message. These are the people that we're trying to work with. Or if you know somebody with a child that's struggling with these issues, shoot them this podcast, shoot them this message, tag them in this, because we'd love to be able to work with those types of kids. Because at the end of the day, our mission statement here at Innately Chiropractic is simple. It's to help as many people as humanly possible, but especially kids. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I hope you learned something. I hope you really were able to take something from it. So drop it in the comments. Let me know, what did you learn from today's podcast? What did you think was interesting? What maybe do you have more questions on? But go ahead and just drop a comment about what something was that you learned that you really enjoyed today on today's podcast. So until next time, this is the Innate Effect Podcast with Dr. Alex DeFrancisco.